Joining us now is Timothy Gordon. Perfect guest for this week for the 4th of July. Now, I'm a Catholic, and he's been involved in Catholicism for some time. He's an author. He's also a philosopher, and he's got some enlightening things to say to us today. Timothy Gordon, good to have you with us, man.
Thanks a million. Glad to be here.
All right, Timothy, also the author of the book Catholic Republic, and the byline on it is some Catholics and Christians decry the deism of our founding fathers, claiming that outright anti-Christian principles lie at the heart of the Declaration of Independence. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, this is a misnomer, right? A popular misnomer that seems to have gained quite a bit of steam in our day. Unfortunately, some people are saying that all of the founders were Masons and anti-Christians, and there's something inherently anti-Christian. This is incorrect. And, of course, the other trope, which is a little less misleading, is that the founding fathers were mostly Protestant. Now, that's, of course, correct. We all learned this right in middle school or whatnot. What they don't tell you is that America is a nation that's been wired Catholic, even though it's labeled Protestant, and now, of course, it's functioning secular. The Catholic intellectual tradition is what was being recurred to by the guys that were calling themselves neo-Whigs, guys like Jefferson, as they enumerated these principles of natural law. It turns out natural law is a uniquely Catholic set of principles, at least the form of natural law that comes down to us. Aristotle and St. Thomas are the founding principles of the country more than John Locke, but you got to look to the sources first.
When you say you want to look at the sources, I'm a Catholic, Timothy, and I make no bones about that on the air. I've been on the air for 9 years. Everybody knows that I'm a Catholic. But a lot of people that I know have fallen away from the Catholic Church, not fallen away from Christianity, not fallen away from Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, but fallen away from the Catholic Church for a lot of the obvious reasons. How do you reconcile that with what is going on in the Catholic Church right now and what your hypothesis is here?
What's happening in the church right now, I talk about this 3 times a week on my podcast, is strictly reserved to what we'd say. It's a church men problem, as you know, John. It's not a church problem. The Catholic intellectual tradition, which gave us things like universities, libraries, and really the principles of limited government, subsidiarity, federalism. This has nothing to do with what's happening in the church today, any more than the idea of anti-constitutionalism has to do with right-minded constitutionalism. What's happening in our church today is a church men problem because they're not living. It's complicated, and I talk about it in detail every day, but it's really the stealing into Roman Catholicism of modernist ideas, and those modernist ideas is gaining a foothold with churchmen, with the prelates of the church, bishops, cardinals, and all the way to the top. But really, it's actually the ideas of modernism, which is to say the 16th and 17th centuries, Protestantism and Enlightenment, that are really killing the church. So it's a separate issue. But when you understand right-minded Roman Catholicism, particularly from the point of view of the Catholic intellectual tradition, that which most perfectly articulates the ideas of the natural law, and we're talking natural rights, subsidiarity, limited government, virtue ethics, which, John Adams said you can't have a nation without, proper church-state balance, family economy, well-understood free enterprise economy, then you're really looking at a political tradition which requires Roman Catholicism rather than excludes it. Of course, the trick is here, I understand this initially sounds like a tall claim, but it requires the Catholic intellectual tradition, even as the founders in this country, they knew they were pitching to a Protestant people.
Right.
So they had to package these ideas in the form of the so-called Whigs, guys like John Locke and Algernon Sidney. The interesting thing is, Whigs were English Enlightenment Protestants whose philosophy contradicted the ideas of the natural law. If you know anything about John Locke, his philosophy rejects the ideas of his political philosophy. We don't have to deal with the details here, but there's only one political tradition that squares with, the top line, the metaphysics. You got to have metaphysics. When you take a philosophy class, political philosophy is the easiest form. Metaphysics is one of the tougher classes in that discipline, and you have to be square from sub-discipline to sub-discipline. When you deal with the Reformation and the Enlightenment, the two forces which are said to have founded America, they're not square with the ideas of the natural law. There's only one tradition which does.
Let me just ask you something, Timothy. Do you see a Catholic resurgence coming in this country? A lot of Catholics like me, not happy with the way the church has handled a lot of things, and you call it, I think you gave it a word, a church remedy. I'm just pissed off, okay? I don't know about church remedy. I'm pissed off, okay? I'm a pissed off Catholic. So let's just talk honestly here. So I don't know about remedy. It sounds nice. I'm pissed. That's number one. Number two, I don't like my Pope. That's the other issue a lot of Catholics have right now. Like, I don't like the fact that the Pope is running around, getting involved in climate change, getting involved in politics. I mean, I liked him when he first came. I liked his humble beginnings. I gave him a chance, Pope Mobile, the whole thing. But you got to be able to talk here to regular Catholics like me that are pissed off about what the church has done, about the cover-ups they've done. I got this Pope running around, inserting him into, liberal political agendas. So that's double pissing me off as a Catholic. And I'm saying, okay, where's my church going here, right? And if you follow the Catholic Church and you're a student of it like me, and you grew up in it, it's like, that collar meant something. As a young man, I revered that collar. I was taught that collar was different. They couldn't get married. They couldn't do certain things. They were men of God. So that collar was the safety net. Not so much today, Timothy. I'm going to ask some tough questions here based on what's going on. And then secondly, I got all these cover-ups going on in the church, one after the other, with all these child molestations that are horrific. Now they're all coming out, and the church's involvement in it has been just deplorable. And now I got some Pope running around inserting himself as the liberal icon of all time. Now look, I get the Pope had to deal with Hitler and they had to deal with Stalin during World War II. They had to make deals for the Catholic Church in order for the Vatican to survive. Like, I get that. But, how do you reconcile this for Catholics like me that, Timothy, are just, and I'm going to say the word again, there's no other word that classifies my feeling. I'm pissed. What message do you have to me?
Well, you ought to be pissed. And, it's strange when you get Catholics running around spouting tropes like, whatever guys on Catholic Answers were trying to do at radio stations like that to apologize to the Pope for even 2013, 2014. No one ought to be apologizing for this Pope. But also, it's a bit embarrassing when Catholics run around assuming a Protestant point of view of what the Pope is. The Pope is he's not more than the one steering the bark of Peter and protecting faith and morals, right? That which can't change in the church. So you don't want to assume a Protestant view of the Pope. He can't change the doctrine, of course. All he's there to do is to protect the doctrine. And we've had tons of saint popes. This is number 266 for people out there listening that don't know the history of the papacy so well. We've also had popes that sired children in the Vatican, right. Arguably through rape. We've had the Borgias. Right. This pope is sui generis. He's different from even the other bad ones in one way. There's only one way, and it's that the other bad ones were content to, live a life of immoral pleasure seeking behind the scenes. And this isn't that many of them, but it's definitely a couple handfuls maybe 3 handfuls if we had that. But there is enough out there to typify. This pope is not only a bad pope, right? But he's actually it's relatively well established at this point. After Cardinal Gottfried de Niels, the Belgian, admitted that there was something called a Sankt Gallen Mafia that would meet once a year in order to in Sankt Gallen, Sweden, before the 2005 conclave, and their entire point for those 8 or 9 yearly meetings before 2005 was to avoid a Ratzinger papacy. If your listeners don't know about this, they need to look into it. The Sankt Gallen Mafia. They had one guy in mind before that 2005 conclave that they wanted to get, and they had the one guy that they, of course, knew was the CDF, the number 2 in the church, the presumptive next pope, and that was JP2's right-hand man, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. Well, they wanted to avoid Ratzinger, but who did they want? No one even knew this young Bergoglio from Buenos Aires, and yet they managed to get him number 2 in the voting at the 2005 conclave, even though no one knew who the hell he was. That's because there's a powerful lobby in the Catholic Church, of wicked cardinals and prelates that are not, I wouldn't say in league with the global humanist left. I would say that they're a part of it. These are the guys that the libs in the church, not to put too fine a point on it. And they got their guy 8 years later, and they got their guy in 8 years later after quite a curious run of Pope Benedict, who was doing a good job, turning things around and trying to erase the damage of some of the past 50 to 60 years.
Right.
That includes the molestation scandals. Benedict was really turning this around.
Right.
But the most important thing is that the Catholic Church, that your listeners might not understand, the Catholic Church was infiltrated in the 1930s by a number of homosexualist communists. And this is testified to in even HUAC by someone like Bella Dodd, right, who said this was her goal. She worked for the Soviets, was to turn the Catholic Church around by infiltrating the seminaries who don't have the wherewithal to vet seminarians the way the deep state does, the NSA, for instance. The Catholic Church. So to put a bunch of men in the seminaries, Bella Dodd said she put 1,100 herself, who were placing communist plans into the seminaries, and they were geared to do precisely what's been happening over the last. It's not just the last 5 years; it's really the last 50 with the pedophilia and ephebophilia. Ephebophilia is a post-pubescent molestation, which things like DSM-5 handled differently. Most of these are ephebophilia. They're homosexual men in the priesthood, which is a vast majority, I'm sad to say, of the lobby in the Catholic Church. The powerful players in the Catholic Church are run by the homosexual lobby, and which is why you see what you see, ephebophilia run out of control, desecrating God's sanctuary. I'm more angry about it as a loyal son of the church than your average, Protestant or secular conservative. So it's not a tough question for me.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being with us today, Timothy Gordon, the author of Catholic Republic. You can get it on Amazon or your favorite bookstore. Timothy, we're going to have you back so we can continue this enlightening conversation. Basically, you're laying out there that the problems of the Catholic Church can get traced back to communist and homosexual infiltration of the seminary in the 1930s, and you're leading it back to one person. Who was that? Give me that name again.
Bella Dodd, testified before a House Un-American
Bella Dodd
Activities Commission.
Thanks, man. I got to go. John Fredericks Radio Network.